Good morning. This is Dr. George Brooks with the Aquaponics Victory Garden from Next Horizon here in Phoenix, Arizona. Every now and then, something very, very cool happens. The other day, I was doing something random, and my iTunes decided to open and play some music. I didn't tell it to do so. Macintoshes kind of have minds of their own. But what came up on my iTunes was a podcast that was done almost 7 years ago to today uh, in Seattle, Washington. At that time, I was at Aquaculture America. This is the meeting of the World Aquaculture Association's United States chapter, and we meet all over the place. Now, this year it was in Seattle, and I was giving a talk there. And this is the aquaponics section at this particular year's conference in 2014. And they've expanded dramatically since then, now here in 2021, where we have almost 2-day sessions on aquaponics. It's truly growing to be an important subject, and there's really some good science being done. But it was a 1-day session back in 2014, and there were a lot of great people there doing it, such as like Charlie Schultz, as an example, who was the leading this particular session. And I had a chance to talk to Dr. Jim Rakosi. He had given the paper just not too much before mine. And as some of you know, he is considered to be the father of aquaponics. I know that there are many people who were working on it at the same time, but with his development of the University of the Virgin Islands method, many people consider him to be that person who put it all together properly. And it was a nice conversation. But after my presentation and his, Mr. Jeff Purnell from the Aquaculture Association, now he is from Galactic Farms, but he was the education director of the Aquaponics Association. And he was doing some interviews of people who were at that session. He was kind enough to have a few words with me. Now, in listening to what was in that podcast, his group was called Crucial Catalyst. I was absolutely amazed because and I was it allowed me to understand where I was back in 2014 and now where I am today. But there was a lot of information presented here that I thought that you might enjoy as well. I'm definitely going to send this to the kids just as a personal history, but I thought you might enjoy this as well. So, and it's amazing actually as to how the industry has progressed since 2014. So here it is. I hope that you enjoy it.
A little bit on what you're doing there to...
All right, who are you? What are you Jeff, why are you here today?
I'm here, thanks, George. Actually, I have two reasons. One, I am the education director with the Aquaponics Association. And two, I run a podcast that's called Crucial Catalyst, and our tagline is bringing good change. We look at food sustainability, water issues, and also social issues that lead to a better life. I was really impressed with your talk today and what you're up to in Phoenix and Phoenix, Arizona, and really curious on if you could enlighten us a little bit on what you're doing there to help with sustainability.
Okay.
And farming.
And sustainability and farming.
Yeah, I know it's a big question.
That's a big. You want to narrow that down a little bit?
Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't you tell me what you're doing here?
Why am I here
at this conference?
Sometimes I really wonder that question.
We're at the American Aquaculture Conference, so it doesn't seem like Phoenix would be a place that people would think, oh, fish grow there. It's in the middle of a desert. Okay. Why is it so important that you're traveling all the way to Seattle to have a to give a talk about the importance of aquaponics and bringing food into the food deserts?
Well, the reason I've always been interested in aquaculture in Arizona, I'm a native Arizonan, born and raised there, is what we today call sustainability. Back then we had other terminologies for it. I've
my mother is a scientist, and she has always, my speaking style came from my father, who's a pastor. He had 2 PhDs, a scary guy.
That explains why you're so passionate up
Yeah.
on the up on the podium. All right.
But my scientific curiosity came from my mother. She was a bacteriologist, and she worked back on some very, very nasty diseases, one called valley fever that still they've never found a cure for. And my curiosity came from her, but she always pushed me into new areas, and she was the one who introduced me to aquaculture. I always had an interest in being a marine biologist. As a child, I was able to go, we live in Phoenix, we go to San Diego. I had the ability to bring back sea animals in a thermos jar and keep them alive for months in a tank at home. And then I took an interest in farming, and she showed me the connection between fish and farming. And I've been there ever since. But in after I got my master's degree in marine biology from San Diego State, I ended up going home, and my first job was with the University of Arizona in aquaculture, which was wonderful. I was what was called an assistant in extension, but only because I didn't have my doctorate at that time. So I was doing all the work of what we would now call an extension aquaculture agent or specialist. And that is, my job was essentially to work with all the farmers in the state and show them how to include aquaculture as part of their farming rotation.
Okay.
Traditional aquaculture was not practical in Arizona. We had too little water, it was too hot, and water was too expensive.
Right.
However, with miles and miles of often full irrigation canals in certain parts of the state fed by well water, which was perfectly clean, what we were trying to do was show farmers how to use less water, less electricity, less fertilizer, less labor, less whatever, and make more money. Back then, it was called low input agriculture. Today, they call it sustainable agriculture.
Okay.
There's no difference. Well, part of that scenario is that you're going to have a canal full of water, put some fish in there.
Right.
And therefore get a double use of that valuable and limited natural resource. So that is where, we would call that being sustainable today. Making the most of what you got, maximizing your resources while minimizing your inputs. I worked in that area for quite some time until we basically found out that the majority of farmers in Arizona, their farming methodologies was not conducive to fish farming. When you run a cotton farm, you essentially bale the cotton, and then the cotton gin does the rest of the work. And fish, you got to do the whole 9 yards.
Right.
And then we had the influx of overseas product that came in at a very, very low cost, and that kind of took care of that, even though there is still one major fish farm out there in the middle of the desert that's doing quite well, I understand, growing tilapia. Many years later, I worked in sustainability in NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act, desert ecology. I was the environmental coordinator for one of the Indian communities near Phoenix, the Gila River, great people. But I came back to aquaculture as a request from a friend of mine. He and I did a great job on a great project on Gila River. Myself, and an incredible teacher by the name of Joyce Baldwin, where we used an early form of aquaponics. And we taught kids to breed tilapia, and they did projects on fish eggs and fish development and all kinds of stuff. And these kids did incredible things. They took them to local science fairs and they won. We took them to state science fairs and they won. We took them to the international science fair and they won a 4th place in the world from the reservation just south of Phoenix.
Wow.
And I remember that, and the same person asked me, Ed Mendoza, asked me some years later, about 4 years ago, would I help him do a similar project at the new school where he was at, still on Gila River? And I told him yes, but the only way to do that kind of project was from where we were, we had a 10-acre farm to play with.
Okay.
So we had 100-foot ponds and cage culture and macrobracken underneath. It was it was great. But we couldn't do that inside of this greenhouse. So the only solution we had was aquaponics. Now,
Was that because of the filtration? Like you needed to get recirculate the water to get clean. Why couldn't you? Why was aquaponics only?
because we did not have the option to do a flow-through system.
Okay.
At the original farm, which was called, you can look it up on the World Wide Web, it was called Autumn Oidak, and there's still references to that work up on the web. It was a model flow-through farm. It was a farm that was at the Juvenile Detention Rehabilitation Center, where Ed was in charge of using that farm to help the kids who were incarcerated develop new work habits and new lives. And he felt that doing a fish farm there would be a great addition to that. So he pulled me in. I was working for a different department because he knew my background. And he asked me to help him do that. But it was a flow-through farm where he had a pond, and we had tilapia and macrobracken shrimp, and the water would flow through and out the other end with the nutrients, and it would feed about 4 or 5 acres of crops.
Wow.
Well, at his new school where he was at, he didn't have that kind of resource, but he had this wonderful greenhouse there. So how could we do the same thing as far as an educational program inside the greenhouse?
Right.
And so the only solution that would allow us to do that would be aquaponics. The reason is for a very practical. It's very, very, very practical. I had always wanted to bring aquaculture into urban areas, but we were unable to do so because of the size requirements for flow through, but also the filtration systems for recirculating systems were just plain too expensive.
Right.
The enormous filter just cost too much. What aquaponics provided was a filter that was a profit center.
Right. That's the best part about aquaponics.
Exactly. So looking at it in that way, it's just a recirculating aquaculture system where the filter methodology are these wonderfully productive and edible plants. It was very similar to a system I had worked on when I was a grad student in San Diego, where they were filtering sewage using water hyacinths. Exactly the same thing, except now we're using lettuce on rafts instead of water hyacinths floating in the pond.
Sure.
But it was exactly the same concept. And so to me, it made complete sense. And it was also a little bit embarrassing because it forced me to become an aquaponics convert.
Okay.
You see, when I first encountered aquaponics some years, about the year 2000, I was not impressed by it. Because of my large mindset of the way that things should be done, and also of my experience as far as our industry needing an inexpensive fish to compete with the foreign fish coming in. The cost of production in those early aquaponic systems were out of my box.
Right.
And so I didn't think it had the value. Coming back into this educational situation with STEM education, I had to rethink. And so I began to actually play with the concepts myself, and I was awakened to the incredible potential that this technology that Dr. Rakosi had developed and the University of Virgin Islands, and its great possibilities for doing so many fantastic things in urban areas. In addition, in that time, the green movement has started. More people understood sustainability. City administrations understood it, and there were so many possibilities now. And then the urban farming thing has also began.
Right.
And so when you get the urban farming movement already establishing a ground floor as to what to do with the product, and then you come in with a disruptive technology that can produce significantly more food per cubic foot with less effort, you want to know the truth, than traditional farming does, the light bulbs just went off all over the place. And so I began to focus on this is really possible, and we can do some great things with this in this desert setting where we are. In addition, because we are in the desert, we're in a water poor area in the best of times. To have a technology that can only uses 10% of the water of traditional farming was a definite benefit.
It's hard for people to get their minds around the fact that it uses less water because it's water based. But you don't have runoff, you don't have all these extra things, and really it's only through evaporation that you're losing that a bit.
Yep. Evaporation, evapotranspiration, and leaks.
Right. That's right. If you forget to glue a joint, maybe
yes.
You've got a problem there.
Mm-hmm.
So what's been do you work directly with the city? I didn't quite get your position there. So
I am one of those fortunate, or more likely unfortunate people. who ends up in places where officials ask you to do things. And I was requested, and I'm honored to do so by the mayor to assist with this effort of rebuilding the Phoenix General Plan. Every 10 years, by law, every city in Arizona must rewrite their general plan.
Okay.
Most of the time, they rewrite it and it goes and sits on a shelf. Mayor Stanton wanted to do something more, and so he appointed a committee of 18 citizens, along with city staff who were all subject matter experts in their areas. My subject matter was sustainability.
Gotcha.
And he wanted to ensure that sustainability was built into the new Phoenix General Plan. And I was very honored that and thankful that he did that. In previous years, I think he knew of some work I had done for Governor Napolitano, who later became Secretary of Homeland Security. She had put me on what was called the Central Arizona Project Board of Directors. The Central Arizona Project is an enormous canal system that pumps water 2,000 feet uphill, all the way from the Colorado River through Phoenix and all the way up to Tucson, going uphill.
Wow. And
it's about half the water that's supplied to Central Arizona, and I was one of the board members on there. And I'm told I did good work on that, and so he may have known of that, I don't know. But the Plan Phoenix effort has been one of great interest and great benefit. And it's been a great project because we're actually getting more and more people to become an understanding of what their city could be, tell us what they want their city to be, and then figuring out how to get there.
Right.
And that's kind of what I discussed today. If we want this to be a sustainable city, we have to do certain things to get there. If you want this to revive our economy, that we need to do certain things to get there. And within those two contexts, urban agriculture, and within the context of urban agriculture, aquaponics provides powerful solutions to do so.
Sure. So are there models in place now that you're looking at to develop these plans as you move forward, or are you going to be the model?
Every city does their own thing. There are some really good models out there. For example, the Plan New York is a very good one. They built sustainability into it. So we're looking at these models. We're not going to be all the same. We're trying to look at them, what fits for Phoenix, what doesn't fit for Phoenix. But we're trying to use as many models as possible and see as many different plans as possible so we can come up with the best solutions for us. But what we want is a living document, one that is not a city document that the city is going to do and everyone's going to wait for them to do it. We want something that people can use as a tool.
Sure.
And to know that there's a dream for the city here, but the people themselves can innovate within this context to help do whatever they wish within their context is to create this city of 2025 where our kids will live in.
Right.
And so that's what we're trying to do for them now.
Are there benchmarks you're looking at as far as like how much food production is created in the city? You mentioned in your talk today that most of your food comes from hundreds of miles away, and of course that's not sustainable.
No.
And so are you looking at certain goals to bring that in and increase production? Is that part of it?
Not yet. First you have to have the dream. To say that for the future, the access to healthy food, the elimination of food deserts, and on is not sustainable, is not something that we want. You have to make that decision. Okay. Then you have to define within that decision exactly what does that mean. So right now we're at the point of making the decision. This is what we want. We want a city that's more sustainable than what it is now. To be more sustainable means that we have to produce more. We have to use less, but you cannot save yourself into prosperity. You have to create something. So can we create more food here? to try to balance in some manner or form this 1.5 billion pounds of food that we eat. Now, mind you, that's just for Phoenix itself. We look at the entire Phoenix metropolitan area, it's closer to 7 billion pounds of food.
Wow.
And all comes from somewhere else. In fact, I would wager you 99% of it comes in from somewhere else. Now, because we are a sprawled city, the city of Phoenix by itself is like 10% bigger than the city of Los Angeles, but we only have a quarter of the people.
Right.
And so that means that this enormous area, everybody got a backyard. So what can we do with that backyard? Urban farming is a great thing to do with that backyard. But then we have, okay, well, how are we going to balance this? Because if we want folks to grow food here, growing food takes water.
Right.
And so, at least to me, my input to this would be a solution set to that for those people who want to do it. Aquaponics is a viable solution.
Very viable.
If we can revise the technologies in a way where they're less complex and where more people can access it. So right now in aquaponics, this is a personal opinion, there's a thing called the diffusion of innovation graph. Have you ever seen it?
No.
The diffusion of innovation graph is where you have a bell-shaped curve.
Okay.
And there is a certain part at the beginning where you have what's called the early adopters and the innovators. Okay, the folks who think things up and the first people who adopt them early. That's about 12 to 15%. Okay, they're the folks who stood out in line to buy an iPhone the first time. When they could have come back 2 weeks later and just walked in.
Right.
Okay. Those folks are the DIYers, the do-it-yourselfers, and they're willing to deal with the complexity. But if we want to get past that tipping point into the rest of the population, we have to do some things differently so that they can access it. Because many of them don't have time to do the kinds of detailed construction work and such it takes to use these early systems. So we need an innovation that's going to allow them to get into this, if we expect them to get into it.
Right. So we're talking some consumer products that maybe are easier, like plug and play off the shelf, even, and or at least some plans that make sense to help people out. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time today, George. I am really grateful that our community. Well, you know what? I've got one more question for you.
As long as you like.
As long as I like. What if you were to encourage citizens from other communities and other cities to make noise so that they can also kind of emulate what you're doing in Phoenix? What are the best avenues for them to follow?
Well, first of all, it depends on where you are. Sunbelt cities tend to be sprawling. And people in San Diego have backyards. People in Las Vegas have backyards. People in Phoenix have backyards. People in Tucson have backyards. People in Albuquerque and Dallas, whatever else. These are places where you can do urban farming. These are places, and that's the place that I would begin with as far as, can you grow some of your own food? Because growing your own food is healthier. Growing your own food is safer. Growing your own food also gives you a sense of accomplishment. So all the psychology works together.
Sure.
And it's something that I would recommend to people. I first learned and understood the value of urban farming from my wife. She began it at home. She began a garden. I wasn't impressed.
with her gardening skills, or with the
that was simply my scientific arrogance.
Oh, okay.
Quite honestly, as being an extension scientist in the smallest farm, I work with 1,000 acres. So who's paying attention to this little garden that you have over here in the corner?
Right.
Until she started getting these sinks full of greens every week or so.
Oh, and the salads improved.
Yeah, the salads improved, and my health improved. And I'm like, Angie, if we were paying for this, how much would this have cost us?
Right.
And when she gave me that number, I swallowed all of my pride and became a convert to urban farming.
Right.
But she was absolutely correct. And then when we added the innovation of aquaponics, right now we have a unit in our backyard that produces food faster than we can eat it.
That's a wonderful problem to have.
Yes, it is. You know, 'cause, we're doing at least, it's just 45 square feet, and we're doing at least a pound and a half a day.
Wow.
Yeah, I've done some tinkering, of course, with the concepts.
Right. You're an innovator also.
So, and it meets a few of those criteria we mentioned before. But we literally have to give, you know, it away to neighbors and such. And it
builds community.
It does build community. All these things. In fact, when we start talking about urban farming in general, clearing a space in a neighborhood. You're talking about the folks. What should folks do? Look at what you're trying to accomplish. If you want to revitalize your neighborhood, here are some steps that will revitalize the neighborhood. If you clear off some vacant land, that's called beautification. If you beautify that, then the housing values in the area come up. Right. If you're going to do it as a community thing, when people start to talk to each other, safety improves. When they begin to learn how to garden, that's called education. When they begin to sell the product, that's economic development. Okay.
The steps keep on going.
Keep on going here, okay? When they begin to eat their food, that's nutrition and health. And when you celebrate what you've done, that's pride in ownership and a revitalized neighborhood.
Gotcha.
And doing that in combination, if you have some land crops, because there are still some things that we cannot grow in aquaponics, but a combination of the two can give you a community setting that is incredibly productive and revitalizing for your community. If you want to do it in your backyard, it still works in micro scale, and it adds to your home economics. A penny saved is a penny earned.
Right.
So and those penny earned by you growing food cheaper than you can if you go to the supermarket is tax free, because it's after tax money. You've already paid the taxes on it, so it's after tax money. It's going back into your account.
Now you're talking dollars and cents, and I think a lot of people will get that too, especially in this tight economy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's time, especially if you're laid off of work or something. You've got time on your hands. You might as well be making food with that.
Precisely, and it is well possible. Americans, we eat more than most people, but we eat about 1,300 pounds of food per year. As individual Americans. That's just an average, up and down, depending on who you are, what part of the country you're in. Right now in our backyard, and using our combinations of our fruit trees, our aquaponics, and our land garden, we probably do close to 1,000 pounds a year.
This is your home system?
This is our backyard.
Your backyard.
This is our backyard. Between the fruit trees just put stuff out.
Right.
Okay, it's just their nature. Well, we have 4 grapefruit trees, and we have 3 orange trees and a peach tree. So the fruit trees just dump stuff on us.
Right.
And okay, and we got to do something with it. And if we can't eat it, then we can exchange it, with barter with the neighborhoods or with the neighbors or whatever else. And then the aquaponics, and the aquaponics, if we are successful, we're doing a test right now of this new concept that we have, and it's been running since last March 23rd, when we got our first harvest from it. So right now we're at 383 pounds as of today in February. So going on to March 23rd, we might make our 400 pounds for this year.
It's incredible.
And then we have the land garden that's much harder to work, but still it is necessary, because you have to have a diversity of crops, particularly those things that you cannot grow, like starches and things such as that. Even though I've got rutabagas and radishes now, out of and beets out of the.
I've seen pictures of beets coming out of aquaponics system.
We did it.
They're bizarro looking sometimes,
but they still taste good. It was a great big pound of beet.
It's
a giant beet. Okay, but it tastes quite good. It's gonna last us for like 2 months. But all of these things, can be done in combination, giving us this incredible source where we are manufacturing. That the nature of manufacturing is that you take energy, you take a natural resource, you combine them and turn it into something useful. Okay, well, plants have been doing that for the past 3.5 billion years. Okay, we are simply harnessing this old technology in a new way to do the exact same thing. Okay, in that our economy has changed so much. We're now back to the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, talking about
Right.
food as the
Shelter,
and shelter as the foundation of a new society. And everybody got to eat. So if we can use food as a way to begin to rebuild economic prosperity, no, there's a green path to economic prosperity, and it begins with food. And we can do this, and then we can go on to other things. But we're back to the beginning, and aquaponics and urban farming provides us a foundation for us to rebuild on. And I'm happy to be part of that movement.
All right, Dr. George Brooks Jr. That
Thank
must
you.
be your dad, the senior.
Yes.
And he had a school named after him.
Yes.
Awesome. I'm really honored to meet you. I am going to stay in touch and I'll follow up. And of course, you'll get a link to the podcast. And I really, really appreciate your time.
I'm honored that you even want to talk to me. Thank you.
It's there's a lot of really cool people here. You're one of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, that's about it. It's amazing what kind of perspective you can gain by looking into the past and seeing what had been said before and comparing it to what has happened now. And since then, a lot has happened. Before I say any of that, I want to thank Jeff Purnell for an amazing interview that stood the test of time. Thank you very, very much, Jeff. But now, since 2014, we found, I said that, what was it, that Americans ate about 1,300 pounds of food. Well, now it's actually closer to 2,000, and that was established by National Public Radio in the year 2011. And of that 2,000 pounds of food, about 35% of that can actually be grown in aquaponics in the backyard if you have the right techniques. We've been able to do some considerable work as far as the streamlining to make it more accessible. That's what the Aquaponic Victory Garden is. And the economic concepts, that green path to economic prosperity actually has some legs. In the same manner as the penny saved is the penny earned. If you can grow food in your backyard for less than it costs for you to go to the store, then you win. And since you need about 800 pounds of vegetables per person, that's 800 pounds of vegetables you would be buying normally from the grocery store anyway. So it's better to grow it in your backyard at a lower cost as you possibly can. All these things have actually becoming more and more real every day. So again, it's a great perspective, Jeff. Thank you again for making the podcast. And we look forward to seeing you sometime in the near future. Thank you for sitting through this, and take care.